One of the best ways to understand HVAC schematics is to start looking at the pictorials, which is a wiring diagram of how things are wired inside a system, and then converting them to schematics, or the ladder schematics that we use to figure out sequence of operation. Now, this one we're currently looking at, that's on our screen right now, is a wiring diagram of a cooler or possibly a small residential freezer. Okay, we have a couple components in here that are relative, and that's actually probably a small commercial freezer because it has an L1 and L2, which means it's probably 240 volts. So we have a defrost heater, which is a newer component we haven't really talked about. All it is an electric heater that's mounted to the evaporator coil or woven into the evaporator coil. Anytime we have an electric defrost heater, I have to have a limit switch, or it's a open on rise thermostat. It's to protect our system from overheating, and these electric heaters, if they don't have a limit switch, can actually start melting the plastic that's holding the coils together. We have a defrost timer. In this case, this is a residential or domestic defrost clock. Okay, these are basically set up to have specific times. I have my cooling thermostat. I have my condenser fan. I have my compressor with my motor overload. I have an evaporator fan. I have a current coil relay. Now what they're showing you in here is that there's a jump from pin 2 to 1 on this flavor of relay. That is actually, it's a blue wire. If the blue wire's cut, you can actually put the start capacitor into this circuit. Okay, so now it's just a matter of wiring this all together. So we're going to start off with L1, but I'm not going to use L1 as my power feed. It really doesn't matter. And for neatness standpoint, I'm going to come across here and I'm going to use my L1 as what I would normally in a circuit with a neutral, I would use as my common. So I'm going to come across here and I'm going to first of all put in this defrost heater. Okay. Actually, let's skip that and let's approach this in another. Let's put in that defrost heater. But we're going to stop right there. Then I'm going to come out again of L1 and I'm going to come up and I'm going to come around because I need to give my motors a common, okay? So I'm going to come around and I'm going to come all the way up from my motors. And some of this is just trying to be neat about this, okay? So I don't have as many crossing lines as I can possibly avoid. Now I'm going to tie my commons in first, okay? We know my condenser fan goes to a common. We know my compressor is going to come to the overload, which is going to come to a common. And we know my shaded pole evaporator motor needs to come to a common. Okay? Now, the condenser, the compressor, and the evaporator fan all have to shut off when defrost is being called. Okay, so everything has to shut off when I'm calling for defrost. My clock in this case is what we call a cumulative clock. It's only going to run during the run times of the system. Okay, so basically I'm going to bring line 1 into my thermostat. Then I'm going to come out of my thermostat to pin 1. Because if you look at the internal components of the clock, pin 1 feeds everything else. Pin 3 is my neutral or my line 2. Okay, it's the other side of the circuit because again, the clock motor is a load. It has to have a line and neutral. Pin 4 is my normally closed. That's my normal operating position. Okay, so that's going to be my power to my condenser fan. Okay, it's my power to my evaporator fan, and I'm just going to come around just because I really don't want to be crossing everything wire-wise inside here. Let's keep this neat so you can see what's going on. Okay. As always, my compressor run goes to M. My compressor start goes to S. Now, because this wire here is showing cut, I can just put my start cap between pins 1 and 2, and I could feed my line into pin 2. So that's how this portion of the circuit goes. Now, we have to take, let's deal with I forgot one thing, my defrost up here. So coming out of 2, we're going to feed my defrost heater. Okay, so that is my circuit. So again, compressor runs normally until the defrost clock says it's time for defrost. Everything down here shuts off. Everything up here goes into defrost. System will continue to operate the defrost. And what we'll eventually do is once the defrost clock is through its set point of number of minutes in defrost, it comes out of defrost and restarts my cooling circuit again. Notice there's no DTT on here. There's no way to avoid this going through the full defrost cycle. So what we do on the other side is we have to now do a schematic from it. So again, I have a line 1. I have a line, I know I'm going to have a circuit breaker, okay? I mean, we might just as well get that over with. So let's make this really short and get this into the correct spot for a circuit breaker. Okay, now I'm just going to copy this over for my other line, and I think I'll move it down a little bit. But we'll copy it over for my line 2. Okay, we'll now label it just because we're going to make sure we always remember to label our schematics. I'm going to label my breaker. Okay, now the first thing we have to do is we have to get our thermostat in with our defrost clock, okay? Because our thermostat's what's actually controlling the motor on the defrost clock. So I'm gonna pull my thermostat that I drew earlier, okay? Because remember, I have my symbol sheet that I've been adding to as we go on. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to paste my thermostat in, because that's where we all start. Then my defrost clock is a shaded pole motor. So let's go ahead and find the shaded pole motor, which is right here. Okay, I'm going to come over. I'm going to paste my shaded pole motor in. Okay, and then there's nothing after that. So my shaded pole motor comes right in here. So I'm going to label this as DC for defrost clock. I'm going to label this TS for my thermostat. Now, right under the next line down, okay, we are now starting to work on what's happening with these contacts. Okay, I have a normally open contact going to a heating thermostat and a defrost heater. So I'm going to come back over to my schematics. Okay, let's find, first of all, I have a normally open contact. Okay, I'm going to copy that one over. Okay, and I'm going to copy it in a way where I can actually now turn it. So I'm going to do a copy, and I'm going to paste it. Gets all of a sudden big. I now can rotate this. Okay, I'm going to get rid of that other one because it doesn't matter anymore. I'm going to take and put that there. Okay, so now I have my normally open. Let's go ahead and grab my normally closed as well because I know I'm going to need that. So I'm going to take my normally closed. I have it here someplace. There it is. Okay, again, I'm going to just select it. I'm going to copy. I'm going to come back over here. I'm going to paste my normally closed. I'm going to rotate it. I'm going to decrease it in size because I really don't need it that big. And I'm going to give myself plenty of room down here. Now, when I look at these two, I do need to label them. And I'm going to label it identical to my DC. Okay, because I want this to be very clear on a legend someplace where DC is defrost clock. Okay, so now I have in my normally open. Now I got to come out of my normally open with a defrost heater and a heating thermostat. Okay, I don't think I've drawn a defrost heater yet, so let's go ahead and take care of that as fast as we can. Okay, defrost heater, we're going to draw sort of big because it's easiest thing in the world to do if we draw it sort of big. And then we'll just decrease it in size. Okay, it's a heater symbol. Now if I take those and I can copy this. Okay, and then I have to make one more line near the end. Okay, there's my defrost heater. Let's label this real quick so we know what it is for the future. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and copy this over to my schematic. So my normally open gets my defrost heater. And we might as well label it while we're there. Call it DH. Now again, defrost heaters have to have, always, we have to have a high limit coming out of it. So it's a normally closed, open on rise thermostat. So let's go back here to my schematics. See, I have a cooling thermostat, but I never made myself yet a heating thermostat or an open on rise. So let's take this diagram, take the description with it. Okay, I'm going to copy it because I'll use it as my base. And what we're going to do is we're going to make some adjustments. First of all, I'm going to say what I want this to be. We're going to change this real quick to heating. Because again, a heating thermostat, all it is an open on rise thermostat. Okay, then I'm just going to Okay, so again, it's an open on rise. So I'm going to take this symbol here because a limit switch, it opens on temperature rise. So I'm going to come back over here to my schematic. I'm going to paste that in there. Oops, I lost my rise part. Okay, I'm going to quickly draw a line so that we see my open on rise. Okay, and I'm going to basically call it just make sure that that connection gets in a little bit better. I'm going to call it HLS for high limit switch. Okay, and then I'm going to connect that into neutral. The whole point of that being that anytime that defrost heater is running and it doesn't need to be, it's going to create enough heat that's going to open that. So now we just have, again, we come back over to my diagram here. All I have is a shaded pole condenser fan, shaded pole evaporator, and a CSIR with a current coil relay. So I know I already have those schematic components drawn, so let's go ahead and grab, we're going to do my evaporator fan and my condenser fan first. That's a shaded pole motor, we'll grab that. Okay, so I have two shaded pole motors. We'll label one of these evaporator fan and one condenser fan. Okay, then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab my CSIR, which I already have right there. Paste it in. Okay, and now I'm just going to wire everything together. So I'm going to take my L, and I'm going to wire my power in. And just to be neat about this, I think I'm going to take and I think I'm going to take and pull this down a little bit. So it looks a little bit better. Okay, so there's my diagram on my line side. Now let's just fill in my, let's just get the line 2 in. Okay, and that's our completed diagram. That's the completed same diagram as we had 21C or your 12C. Okay, we're going to label it 240. And that is our diagram. Now, the difference between these, again, this is a wiring diagram. Okay, it's a pictorial diagram. This is a schematic that shows, ladder schematic that shows you a sequence of operation. What happens when thermostat is closed? What happens when DCC calls for defrost, which opens the normally closed and closes the normally open? What happens when the high limit opens? Okay, what happens when the system goes back into its sequence of operation?